Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Arvada City Council Workshop for October 22nd, 2018. We start with Kristen Rush. You want to call the roll?
Mayor Williams, Mayor Pro Tem Marriott,
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Here.
Councilmember Ford,
Here.
Councilmember Jones,
Here.
Councilmember McGough,
Here.
Councilmember Miller.
Here.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to excuse Mayor Williams from tonight's workshop.
All members have voted. There are 6 yeses and 0 noes, so Mayor Williams is excused. Move on to our first workshop tonight, the home repair program update. Ms. Gillis.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would like to introduce Carice Canales to give us to start off, a report on the home repair projects for 2018, and she has a whole group here with her.
Thank you. Carice, welcome.
Thank you, councilors. It's always good to speak in front of you. So tonight, I will be giving an update along with Ed Talbot from Housing and Jason McCullough from our partners at Brothers Redevelopment. And we'll give you an update on our home repair programs, as well as provide you with an understanding of how and why they've been restructured to better serve our customers. It looks like the screen is down, but I can still talk to you if you like.
And we can see it on our screen.
You can.
So, yep.
Oh, it's up. Great.
There you go.
So, just for context, in 2016, the City of Arvada partnered with Brothers Redevelopment to create Safe and Accessible Arvada. And that was an award-winning program that helps our senior and residents with disabilities with various accessibility and visitability home improvements. And so that way they can safely age in place. So when a task force from Housing, City Manager's Office, Arvada Fire, and Code Enforcement gathered together earlier this year, we did a process improvement. And so this was to allow us to identify any gaps and duplications in services with our previous housing programs. We also wanted to be able to leverage opportunities for neighborhood-based volunteering. So neighbors could nominate a neighbor to do some home repair. We also saw a long waiting list for our Essential Home Repairs program. And so this indicated to us that we had to come up with a housing solution for our residents most in need. So in July of this year, we expanded the scope of work with our proven partners at Brothers so that we could meet some of these needs and eliminate the duplication in services from programs like Resource Smart Arvada and Be a Tool. So our 3 active housing programs of Essential Home Repairs, Safe and Accessible Arvada, and Arvada Help for Homes. They all serve seniors, residents with disabilities, and low to moderate income residents. But they all serve them in different and complementary ways. So Essential Home Repairs does full home improvements, and they have a cap of $30,000 per project. And they're projected to spend about $590,000 this year. Safe and Accessible Arvada does smaller scale accessibility projects, and those are a $5,000 cap, and they have a budget of $75,000 for a year. Arvada Help for Homes does some of the one-off gap services that we had identified in our process improvement. So things like tree limb removal, fence repairs. They also coordinate all of the volunteer projects that neighborhoods can sign up to do. And that is a $5,000 cap per project as well. And they have a $100,000 budget for the year.
Carice,
So, yep.
may I interrupt you real quick? I have a quick question for you. So you told us what their the maximum for any one award is, and then also what their budget is for this year. How about the source of funds for each of these different programs? Where does the money come
Great
from?
question. So Arvada Help for Homes was funded with HODAG funds, And Safe and Accessible Arvada was funded with visitability funding source.
Okay.
And Essential Home Repairs, can you remind me? You want to come up, Ed?
Mayor Pro Tem Mary, a good question, because we actually use funds from a variety of sources. The principal one is Community Development Block Grant Funds, the annual entitlement we have. We also have an arrangement with First Bank, 3 of the First Bank locations, and then that's utilize a revolving loan fund. So as loan repayments that come in from our loan portfolio and such, as there's a factor that kicks off repayment, then that revolving loan fund provides substantial amount of revenue. And if necessary, we also have HODAG as a backup, depending on how much we might go for in a year. So we have several sources.
Okay, and just one quick follow-up, that revolving loan fund from First Bank, what was the source of those funds?
What the bank capitalizes the loans with its own funding. Our role is to subsidize the interest rate on those loans from an agreed-upon rate, typically tied to prime, and subsidize them down to 0 to 3%. So they capitalize the loans, so we don't actually obviously utilize our funding for that, but we'll pay the interest subsidy to get the interest
Okay.
rate down.
And the payments that we make to subsidize the interest, the source of
Oh,
those
that's
funds?
CDBG funds.
Okay.
You
got
got
it.
me there. You
Thank you.
finally got me there.
Thank you.
You bet.
And Ed, you can actually stay up here. So that was just a bit of an overview of our existing housing programs. So Ed Talbot is going to give an update on Essential Home Repairs and also talk through how we leverage the waiting list from Essential Home Repairs to kickstart the new program. So Ed?
So I just have 2 slides to take you through. And you're probably pretty familiar with Central Repairs because it is one of the longest running housing programs we have in the city. Been basically running this program since about 1980. So we have one of the longest running rehab programs actually in the metro area, if not the state, for single family rehab of this nature. So just to give you a kind of a picture where things are, say in the third quarter of the year, we received up to the third quarter 22 completed applications, 16 were approved. Obviously we get some applications we cannot approve. A total of 11 projects were completed. We do emergencies. That's not up to 30,000, that can be up to 3,500, but we can supplement that with other assistance depending what the emergency might be. But we did have one of those through the third quarter. You would think that basically the clients for the program are heavily weighted toward seniors, and those are very low-income seniors. And that's a big part of basically the program that we are working with, is with senior citizens. And then as you can see in the slide, to date, we've obligated about $182,000 in CDBG funds for loans. That wouldn't include any capitalized loans that came through First Bank. And one prime rate bank loan. Prime rate bank loan is a loan category for those in a higher category. They just pay a loan back and the interest rate in that is prime, so we don't subsidize those loans. So to date, give it about third quarter, a total of about $200,000 in expenditures. And as Carice mentioned, we've got a long waiting list. Our list tends to go up and down depending when we'll do our outreach. We're about, give or take, 160 folks on that. You know, we're lucky to get maybe 20, 21 jobs a year done, so it's hard to work through that list, even though we lose some of those folks through attrition. For one reason or another, they won't follow through. So what was really good about working with Essential Repairs with these 2 initiatives is that we could identify folks on the list that we currently have that maybe have one-offs. I'll give you an example. They may have a tree, a big cottonwood tree and such, and they've been told they got to take it down. It's a hazard to the home. They come into Essential Repairs, that's not what we're about. We take a holistic approach to rehab of the home, but they've got that issue or that problem. What can they do? They don't have the money, it's expensive to take down a tree, especially that size. That's where something like Help for Homes can help. So we used our waiting list to try to basically filter that list to find if there were clients that would fit Help for Homes or Safe and Accessible, where they were looking for accessibility modifications on the house, and basically filter those out of our list through those programs where they could get more immediate assistance, you know, to be more appropriate assistance. And now as we go on, as we get calls coming in for the program, we'll also filter them at that point to see if there might be a more appropriate fit for Safe and Accessible Arvada or for Help for Homes, rather than putting them on the waiting list for Essential Repairs. And just a little on customer feedback.
Mr. Talbot.
Yes, sir.
1 second, we have a question here. Councilmember Ford.
Ed, I wanted to ask you on the, can
can a home be retrofitted with the not elevators, but the lifts, chair lifts for less than 5,000?
I'm going to have to bend to my expert. Jason, you may have a feel for that one. This is Jason McCullough from Brothers Redevelopment.
Hi, Jason.
Hi, thanks. Yes, the answer is most times, yes. The average cost we're seeing right now is between $2,900 and $3,400 for a residential standard electric stair lift system. Where you run into problems and you hear about the very high costs is if there's a turn or a landing where that you have to make any kind of a turn. That's a custom piece that sends it pretty much out of most. I've got one of those voices. I trigger things. That's where you see exponential cost increases up to the $10,000 or $12,000 range. But for the majority of the homes that we see, split-level ranch homes where there is a need, it's a straight shot, usually between 8 and 11 feet, and that's in that $2,900 to $3,200 range.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Talbot, I have a question for you too. On this slide, you show a nice picture here of somebody getting a new driveway.
Correct.
Is something like that part of the essential home repair program, or what? Tell
Yes.
me kind of what it applies to and why it might apply to something like that versus other things.
Right. We do exterior work. Very often it might have to do with concrete, or especially we have negative drainage around homes. A lot of these places, basically the concrete may have fallen or basically has come in so that we're getting drainage when water hits that toward the foundation. So we'll see that situation, especially around some homes. And when we have seriously deteriorated issues with driveways or even sidewalks out to the public right-of-way, we'll replace those as well. Typically, you have sometimes tripping hazards, and you know how it can get a little serious with the cracking and such with that.
What are the typical repairs that are done with the essential home repairs?
It's a fairly wide variety. It could be electrical, it could be plumbing, it could be roofing, it could be siding or other issues that might relate to the weatherproof nature of the home. It can get into foundations. We'll also do energy work, energy conservation work, and a lot of times we'll be inside bathrooms or kitchens where we can do what we call general property improvements. That will always come less. We have a set guide on that where we can actually do some work in there where we might have unhealthy conditions such as a countertop that might be heavily scoured with knife cuts and the rest of it that might be an unsanitary type situation. Or there might be unsafe conditions where we could even have cabinets looking to come off the wall. A variety of things include painting. There's a wide variety of work that can be done to the program.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Last bullet on here is customer feedback. One of our performance standards is a survey we do. It's a voluntary survey of all the clients to try to get feedback from them about the program. That's one of the performance measures for my division. And we provide that report to you annually because we do it after the end of the year to try to get basic feedback from the clients on the performance of my staff and operating the program, the contractor, and then general questions about the program itself. And then I did already speak, I jumped ahead about the referral process that I also mentioned again about looking at the waiting list when we first got into this and then as we take referrals and such coming through. And that's really about all I have for you unless you have any other questions.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you so much. Mr. Talbot, thank you so much for being here. I love this program. I love all three of these programs. They're fantastic. So my concern is with 150 people on the waiting list. And, you know, we have 115,000 people in this community that are fantastic. I mean, Arvada is fantastic. And I just got to imagine that if we had some folks that would be willing to volunteer their time, that we could maybe help out some of those folks on the waiting list. And I don't know if that's even logistically possible, but I was just sitting here thinking, man, you know, if somebody needed a railing on their fence or a fence put up, you know, I know that we could grab 10 people with a Facebook post to go out and build a fence for somebody, and then of course your folks come in and inspect it. But is there an opportunity for the community to get involved to really help out their neighbors and really give back to each other? They would feel good about it, and people would be able to get off that waiting list. I think it's a win-win.
I promised the members of council, those here, that I did not feed that question to her to ask, because as we get further into this presentation, we're going to have some good information, I think, on that, especially how it works with the, again, I'm kind of repeating myself, but for help for homes, for trying to get things, for example, fences, we've actually, I think Jason can speak to some of that work that's been done through that to try to get to that. In essential repairs, we work with contractors, given for a variety of reasons, we deal only with general contractors. We won't take a volunteer. You know, we have clients that'll say, well, my brother will come over and help get some of the work done. Not quite the way we work because of various reasons. We work through generals and their subs to get the work done. So, but there's going to be some information coming. I think it'll help with an answer for that. So,
Okay.
you bet. I want to introduce, I already did, but here's Jason.
Okay. My name is Jason McCullough. I'm with Brothers Redevelopment. I manage the home modification and repair department. And thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to share what we've done recently and what we're planning on doing. So the partnership with the City of Arvada, as they stated, started last year. Was very successful. We had 11 projects, spent all of the funding for the year down. They were all based on accessibility and visitability. So the ability to safely enter and stay in your home. And the majority of our clients were seniors, either a multifamily household with some sort of disability, or which is our classic Brothers client, which is a female in her mid-70s, widowed, and who has owned her home for about 30 years. We see that pretty much everywhere we go, and we saw it in Arvada as well. The partnership between the City of Arvada is to administer these programs, hopefully will increase the overall healthy home stock and avoid needless code enforcement and public safety issues, stabilize and revitalize local neighborhoods, one house at a time, maintain viable, affordable housing in Arvada with increased access and visitability across the board, assist senior residents who are our largest and most growing demographic right now, who wish to age in place and in the community, and then to fight senior isolation, which is a wonderful kind of side effect of this process and these programs, as you'll see here, especially with our volunteer program, and avert fall risks, which are the most expensive and common senior injury right now. And obviously, we always put in build a healthy, happy house in Arvada. So this year, thus far, we spent $50,000 with these various projects. The safe and accessible report. So this is a photo from Mrs. Coulaton, who is a wonderful woman who was waiting to get her first knee replacement surgery that she's been saving for years for, but she lives alone and did not have a way to access her bedroom in the home she lives in without some extensive accessibility modifications. So we were able to come in and do this custom rail, add grab bars and rails to the front and back entrance to the home, change doorknobs to handle style, and then put some stuff in her, or some hardware in her bathing area so she'd be able to maintain her home and live there post-surgery. She's now preparing for her second knee surgery on the other knee, and she's very pleased with the outcomes, and it was successful, so she's ready to move forward with that and be a more, increase her ambulation and comfort. So most of the projects are similar to this, where we're doing ramps or hardware installations. We've had a couple, we call them full bath mods, where you pull the tub, remove the tub, and install a roll-in or step-in shower, which allows people to effectively have a safe wet area in their home, so that they can maintain, safety with independence, and that on average we see people staying in their homes an additional 10 years over what they would normally. It's hard to collect data, but that's what we see kind of across the board. The Arvada Help for Homes is a new program, obviously they mentioned this year, and it's modeled after our classic Help for Homes program that we run throughout the region. The wonderful part about the Arvada program, it allows us to touch some of the things that people don't plan on having to deal with their home, and encourages stabilized neighborhoods, safer public and exterior areas. And it also feeds into that accessibility in the volunteer program. You always find opportunities. So this is a photo of Mrs. Woodhouse's fence that was getting pushed over, but she backs up to a city park and the sprinklers were pushing her fence over. So we were able to, because it was some installation methods that probably weren't on par with what should be done normally. So we were able to repair that, reset it, and get that ready for her. She had issues with folks just kind of hanging out in her backyard. That's why she put the fence up in the first place. It wasn't something she could really afford, but she was nervous about her privacy and people coming up and looking in her windows. So we were able to maintain that for her. In doing this, we also found that she's 81. She's quite spry, but that she was also having a hard time. She avoided using her front door, so we were able to put in a custom rail at that point, and then also referred her to the Paint-A-Thon program, which I'll touch on, which is the volunteer for future maintenance and house painting and yard cleanup stuff that she needs. There were 6 projects, there's 4 completed so far. We have 6 projects in the pipeline. That's directly related to referrals from the Essential Home Repair program, which they send us these lists. We can then process, reach out to people, get the application started, offer housing counseling, aging in place services, and then when we do these projects, we can then refer them out to other programs that they may not know about in the neighborhood and the area. Our volunteer program started officially in partnership with the city this year. To your question specifically, so we did 3 projects. It was a little late. By the time we got going, we were already kind of mid-season for the Paint-A-Thon. The Brothers Paint-A-Thon is a volunteer-based local community outreach program that our hope is it's its 40th year this year. We try to paint 100 senior homes. You have to be 60 years old and older, have a house that's less than or at 20 feet tall, because we have volunteers on ladders, and there has to be a need financially and for the house. We did 117 this year, and 3 of them were Arvada. We hope to have a lot more next year, because now we have the whole fall and off season to kind of process some more people and get some more community partnerships going with that. The 3 that were done by Faith Bible Chapel was one group. They had 14 volunteers. The other one was Hiratsuka and Associates. They had 12 volunteers. And then Quest Diagnostics, HCA Health One, brought 20 volunteers. So we had a total of 308 volunteer hours. That's almost 10,000, 8,248, almost $10,000 in volunteer hours, which we do keep track of as well, because that's a big deal. The other great side effects, like I said, it fights senior isolation. One of the clients, one of our volunteers, noticed that she lived on the same block as her mother, who she checks in on, so she now checks in on the client as well on a weekly basis. So it's a great way to connect communities and get these folks kind of out of the shell they've been in for sometimes decades, and gets the community to notice them, and them to kind of re-enter the community, which is a big deal, and it leads to healthier homes. So all those homes were scraped, painted, of course with all required EPA, lead-based paint preparation and containment. And then the volunteers come out, we provide the paint, the ladders, and oversight with a safety officer from our crews. And they paint the house, perform extensive yard cleanup, and just tidy up the place so that you've got a prettier home, a home that people can be proud of. It's a nice house on the block now, which kind of helps overall with those community efforts. And I will turn it back over to Carice for next steps. Was there any other questions about the volunteer program or anything we're doing there before I sit down?
Mr. McGough, you've got a question?
Yes, I think this is for Ms. Canellis. Wondering, I was asked again this past week about the Snow Buddies program, which doesn't have to do with construction, but has to do with removal of snow for those who are unable to do that themselves. Is that going to be in existence this year?
Thanks, Jason. Absolutely. We've restructured that program a little bit as well. So now we have every applicant apply every year. so that we know that they want the assistance. And then we're really trying to narrow it down to people in their immediate neighborhood to volunteer for them. So we actually just made our first matches, so it was a great time for you to ask. And our Snow Buddies coordinator will be mailing those out this week.
Okay, now we've had a little bit of problem in recent years, I think, with getting the number of volunteers. Does it look better for this year?
So far, we're doing pretty well. I think we might have, I just looked at the list this morning, about 10 people that aren't matched. But as the snow starts falling, we'll get more calls, and that actually also prompts more volunteers. If we do have a mismatch, then we do targeted posts on Nextdoor. So I may have 5 people in Pomona neighborhood, and so we can post directly on that, or email our neighborhood leaders as well.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions before I go into next steps?
You know, I have one more question. It sounds like there's some overlap between these 3 programs, and I understand they're different sources of funds. Do all 3 of these programs applicable to the same people? I think, Mr. Talbot, you'd mentioned these are very low income to moderate income, but are all those programs available to everybody who is either very low to moderate, or some of them tilted more towards very low and some of them more open to a broader range of people? Or how do we do that or differentiate?
Yeah. I'll speak to essential repairs because we actually have a graduated scale, you would say, of assistance. At the most, let's call it the deepest subsidy level, we do 10-year forgivable loans. That's just for low-income seniors or households that have a disabled or handicapped member. On that one, there's no repayment required from the loan recipient so long as they stay in the dwelling for 10 years. If they leave in 5 years, then half of the amount has to be paid back when they have a closing on the sale, for example. The next level would be deferred, and that's for basically your lower income rung, but it's not just limited to seniors and handicapped households with handicapped members. And that is basically a deferred loan, just means you don't make any repayments on it. A lien is put against your home, but when a triggering event takes place, typically from the sale of the home, then the capital amount of the loan's repaid. Then we get into the bank loans, and this is the 0% and 3% loans, and then we're looking at higher levels of income. The one difference would be on the emergencies. We do the emergency assistance for those at a bit of a higher income level, but it's a limited amount at $3,500. But we can supplement that with another deferred loan or even a forgivable loan, depending on the income of the client. Very often we run into issues with sewer lines, and we can't take care of that with $3,500. It takes a little bit more.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
Great. So next steps. Moving forward, we plan to promote the expanded and the existing programs to find more qualified candidates and really ramp that up as we want as many people to be served as possible and to really bring down that essential home repairs waiting list. We also want to specifically emphasize the neighborhood-based volunteering opportunities. So really you can have a neighbor and nominate them for some assistance, and then rally your neighborhood to do a volunteer day with the Brothers staff. We already had a few neighborhoods express interest when we launched the program, so we wait for the good next weather season to get them really involved that way. We also want to continue to train our staff on the referral process so that we can make sure that our residents are finding the appropriate services. And all of these programs fall under our Vibrant Communities and Neighborhoods work system. So as we're continuing to develop our strategic plan for the next phase, we will be identifying some valuable performance measures that align with these housing programs and also with our Neighbors Connected program for council to consider. Lastly, something that we heard from both our recent housing fair and our Speak Up Arvada platform is that these programs are incredibly important to our residents and that the ability to age affordably and safely in place is going to be a great priority for the future. So that is our presentation.
Okay.
I'd love to take any questions.
I have a question from Councilmember Ford.
So first of all, I'd like to really thank all of you for what you're doing because it's really fantastic and so needed. And I did want to ask Carice, Jason talked about people who are alone, and this is something that bothers me as well. And I think that, for the most part, we talk about older women because they tend to live longer. Just in my own life, I know of several women who just don't get out. And, primarily it's because they don't drive anymore and they may not have family in the area or family that's able to help them all the time. So is that something, so I guess my question would be, how can we find those people? And is there any plan to do something? Maybe there are organizations already. I know the Senior Resource Center is one, but I've often thought if some of these people who are alone could just have some conversation every now and then, it would be really helpful. Is there thought about that?
Definitely. So just to answer a few parts of your question, the first of how we find these people, just the example of our housing fair that we had at the end of September, we had about 250 people show up to that event.
Wow.
Within a 2-hour period. And Jason actually was able to table at that event, and afterwards he said he got a flood of applications coming in. So we just have to be really proactive with outreach. I plan to promote these programs through our neighborhood leaders as well. And really that gets to the issue of isolation, is we want it to be the norm that you look out for your neighbor. So go introduce yourself. You may notice that you have an elderly woman neighbor who could use some help. So go say hi, reserve the block party trailer, invite her out for some ice cream, and really just take care of each other. So this is at the heart of what we're doing, and we're trying to weave in all of our different initiatives so that we can exactly address those issues.
Thanks. Thanks for doing what you're doing.
Okay, I don't see any more questions, so thank you very much for your presentation
Thank you.
tonight. We appreciate it. Okay, next up, we have an update from the JeffCom staff regarding JeffCom operations. Ms. Gillis, I'm going to introduce this.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jeff Streeter, the Executive Director for JeffCom, to provide that update, and he's prepared for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Streeter, welcome.
Council, good evening, and thanks for having us. By way of introductions, my name is Jeff Streeter. I'm the Executive Director at JeffCom 911. I've had the opportunity to be the director for 15 months, starting last June. Many of you I had the opportunity to present to, I believe, last fall. And that's when we were in kind of those early stages of standing it up, kind of some equipment needs, a little bit with the technology, and somewhat of the vision moving forward. But we weren't to the transitional stage yet. So tonight I kind of want to bring you forward as to where we have been, a little bit to where we are right now, and what our objectives and our goals moving forward are. Before I get started, I want to introduce two of my staff members. I have Vicki Pickett here with me, and she's one of our operations managers. You may recall Vicki Pickett worked here at Arvada for a number of years. She was the comm manager here prior to transitioning over to JeffCom, 2016? 2017. And I also have Kevin Biegert. Kevin Biegert's our system administrator. He oversees a lot of our technology, the implementation of our CAD. And I brought both of them because I'm certain you're going to have questions that are far beyond my scope and ability to answer. So I want them to have the opportunity to address any questions and concerns you may have. But I'm going to kind of jump into our PowerPoint. Let me throw one more caveat in here. You have a PowerPoint that I sent out last week. What I've done, and my apologies to you, is I've made a slight change to it. Had a spelling error, wanted to correct that. I changed a word in it, wanted to fix that. And I added a screen tonight that I want to show you, giving just the October stats and our numbers. And I'm very proud of where we're moving to. So you'll see a new screen tonight, and that's the only changes. And I believe you have those, and I'm sorry I didn't have those to you beforehand. But I want to talk a little bit about kind of where we were with our cutover dates and some things that we were faced with. On the screen here, we show that our first cutover date was March 12th. of 2018. Ideally, we were planning for 1 month prior to that, February 12th of 2018. But due to one of our vendors and a couple technology issues around some switches and our implementation, we weren't willing to risk jumping off in February, so we postponed and delayed our opening. That ultimately, it gave us some opportunity, but created us some issues as well. The opportunity was it gave us another month to do some forms of training, which we were actively doing, but it delayed us in some other opportunities with getting employees over, the eagerness of that transition, so it caused us some of that as well. But the first agency we moved over March 12th was Golden Police Department, Golden Police and Fire, I'm sorry, and they cut over at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I can tell you with all of these cutovers that are before you on this screen, all of them weren't seamless. They were all seamless. We had no issues whatsoever with the cutover, with the implementation of having the employees start there, standing down one center while standing them up here. Everything from the phones to the radio to the implementation of even the CAD systems, both in the cars that the officers and first responders, fire, et cetera, were using, to the CAD, and the technology was available to the call takers and dispatchers. So every one of these went flawlessly, in my opinion. The very next day, we moved over Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. That was a large move for us. They're a large organization, a lot of moving parts. And then followed by that, the very next day, another large agency with West Metro Fire moving in on March 14th. That took care of that week. What happened with this delay that was postponed from February, it took all the moves to come together in basically a 3-week time period where we had a plan laid out with some training opportunities, getting people on the floor, getting them comfortable, using them to train and onboard other staff. We did transitions in a 3-week time period that created a whole other series of issues for us. The very next week, March 20th, Arvada Fire cut over. March 21st, Arvada Police Department cut over, and then our March 22nd, Wheat Ridge Police Department. We are still not 100% operational. Week and a half later, 10 days later, roughly, Evergreen Fire cut in, and then we culminated with April 4th, the largest agency to cut in for us, just due to volume of calls and staffing numbers, was Lakewood Police Department, April 4th. We became 100% fully operational April 4th. Now, that didn't mean we were fully staffed, but we were 100% operational. While all other centers were stood down, we now had everybody out of one center at our building. It's a little tough to see, but I wanted to share with you some staffing numbers. And for us, we sent out letters in this anticipation of the transition and what this was going to look like. All of the existing staff in the 8 PSAPs that were partnered into this, the existing staff were sent letters, and the letters were basically offering them a job, guarantee their salary as it was written at that point in time, and letting them know the benefits and et cetera were going to be carried over by JeffCom, and giving them dates to the best of our ability of when those transition periods would start. We sent out, and I'm going to use Arvada because that's where I'm at. For Arvada Police Department, we sent out 23 letters. We had 13 letters returned to us, and us receiving those letters back were the indication that these employees specifically were agreeing or at least signing that their intent was to come over to JeffCom. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a binding contract. It was just they made indications so we could plan of who was going to come over. So if 23 letters going out for Arvada Police Department, 13 came back. Arvada Fire, you can see it was 10 and 10. At the onboarding process, and that's us doing the benefits and them signing up and you know, all the things that happened during open enrollment of benefits. Arvada Fire remained the same at 10. Arvada Police Department, we dropped 1. So 12 actually went through the onboarding process. Carrying across, at the time of cutover, we lost 1 more Arvada person at then. So on the date for Arvada Police Department, that being March 22nd, I think it was 22nd? March 22nd, we had 11 Arvada personnel sign on. Now you can look up and down this line at time of staff cutover. You know, I think the theme across here is we did lose people at varying stages. Prior to even the first day that they stepped foot in our building to physically do work, we lost people along the way. What I put over on the right, and again, I'm not dealing with our new employees yet of what we've done with our staffing onboarding, but at the time today, the right column over there, you see that Arvada Fire, we've lost 1 more, so we're down to 9 that originally had come over. The 10 that had come over, we're down to 9 that are actually still physically there. And for our Arvada Police Department, those trained employees here from Arvada, we're down to 4. That is concerning, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. But we knew through the course of this there was going to be levels of transition and levels of staff lost through that portion of transition. I've had the opportunity in this role to talk to a number of other centers around this country and their executive directors. Prior to us even moving into transition date, I had been cautioned, severely cautioned by some executive directors, stand by, you're going to lose 50% of your staff before you ever open your doors. We didn't lose that. I'm proud of that we didn't lose that, but we have continually lost staff for varying reasons moving forward. Oops. What I want to cover with you is we do have a plan in place, and we have been aggressively hiring. And I'm bringing you more current now up to August. August 13th, we onboarded 6. September 26th, approximately a month ago, we onboarded 7. And they're in training. They're going to finish up their classroom training this week and hit the floor for on-hand training with a personal advisor through that. And then we're onboarding 8 more Monday. And then we have job offers out to 10 for November. So we are aggressively every month hiring new employees to try to backfill our loss. So to put the losses in perspective of kind of where we should be, we should have 118 what are referred to as ECS, Emergency Communication Specialists. We should have 118. Through this, just through November of getting these hirees and being successful and not accounting for attrition, this will bring us right up to about 111. So we're starting to move back closer to our full staff strengths. We're still short, but we're much closer. This is a phenomenon, quite frankly, that's going on in every emergency dispatch center around this country, but in Colorado as well. Boulder Police Department reporting they're 23% down. Denver Police Department, I met with a representative from them today, they're down. With 2.8, 2.9 unemployment rates in Colorado, it's difficult to find people. These numbers reflect that we've been very successful. This board that represents JeffCom wants us to be a Tier 1 organization. I've heard them loud and clear, and through that, with our quality benefits and our quality pay, our work environment, we feel we will be a Tier 1 organization, and these hires right here moving forward will get us there, coupled with the people that have moved over and transitioned and are part of this organization today. One of the functions, and we'd hoped going into this transition that we could hold up on cross-training. If the numbers would have held based on our insights of who had signed letters and agreed to come back and move over, we felt we could stabilize before we had to get into cross-training multiple positions. And what I mean by that is many of these positions are skilled. So if you knew Arvada Police Department dispatching, it's going to be difficult for you with an uptick to learn Jefferson County Sheriff's Department because there's nuances to every organization. It's not standard across the board. We had hoped that we could stabilize and then start the cross-training in a very systematic manner. What we found that through our losses, it accelerated our timelines to have to do cross-training much sooner. We began cross-training almost immediately following transition because we anticipated and started seeing that we were going to have considerable loss. Of this, now of our folks, 106 folks now are cross-trained in 3 or more positions. What I mean by that is if you came to us from a law dispatched arena, you now have call taking. You can take calls and know how to process, enter a call, and move the call forward. And you may have had Arvada Police Department. I'm going to use them. Now you have at least one more skill. So maybe you can dispatch at Wheat Ridge or Golden or Lakewood or even Jefferson County for that matter. So we've challenged people to be trained in at least one more capacity than what they came over to us at. That is to our successes.
We have a question from Councilmember Jones.
Well, you're kind of answering my question, which was good. And it was, and I'm guessing the cross-training also, you're not hiring, it would be perfect if you could hire a bunch of people from Arvada and a bunch of people from Lakewood and a bunch of people from Golden, but the chances of that happening are probably slim. So how do you train them geographically?
That's probably one of our biggest challenges, quite frankly, that we have seen. I don't know that I can, quite frankly. We haven't attempted that because with an unemployment rate at 2.9, we're taking applications.
Sure.
We're not minimizing our standards. We're going after the most qualified, meeting our standards. We are taking people that would be deemed to be laterals, meaning they've had 3 years of experience at potentially another center, say in Denver, Aurora, whatever. So
they're-
we're going after those aggressively.
So they're expert call takers. They're relying upon the information coming in to dispatch out. So they may not necessarily know Arvada, but they're going to hopefully get enough information when they're taking that call that as it goes out through dispatch, it's going to be correct so that fire or police can get to where they need to go.
Yes, sir. Our systems and through technology, and certainly Vicki and Kevin can speak more to that. It's beyond my scope.
Yeah, no,
But
I
these
get,
maps,
it's beyond mine too.
they're
And I don't even know why I'm
mapping, so-
asking the question.
So we can go off the best information that the call taker is able to get from the reporting parties
Yeah, no. I
off
get that.
addresses. But what is unique, and I don't know if it's unique, it probably isn't, but the address pops up in a map. So they have visual relationships to where the call is. If it's a 911, it populates. They have maps accessible to them. So they have something to draw
Okay.
from. They may not live in Arvada. They may not even live in Jefferson County, but they have tools available to them for orientation to the call.
Okay,
that
that's
they're
good to know.
handling. Is
Thank
that-
you. That's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Okay. So the cross-training will be ongoing. This is something that we're going to be a training center. If I could tell you a strategic goal would be to have everybody cross-trained, I can tell you we're talking with no attrition. This is going to take years. Because we have a skill set that's required, it takes a certain skill set and training to learn how to dispatch fire. Whether it's Arvada Fire, West Metro, it doesn't matter. Each one of them have different nuances to what they require within their response plans. Same with law. It's just going to take a long time because dispatching at Arvada is different than dispatching at Jefferson County Sheriff's Department or any other organization. So it's a goal. We've made it a goal. We're going to strive for it, and we're going to continue with this cross-training that helps us with staffing and scheduling and assignments and seat assignments in a large center such as this. The other thing I want to talk about is our calls. This is a busy center. We took in 8 PSAPs, and with that, some were they didn't have the volume of calls, let's just put it that way. They weren't dealing with the volumes. So you can see just in March, and incoming calls in March, and keep in mind, we weren't fully staffed, 26,150 calls. Of that, I want to reflect work's going on because we have another 7,000 calls, a little over 7,000 calls, that they're having to call back reporting parties. They're having to call and follow up on 911 hang-ups or follow up on calls or talk to other agencies. So there's an awful lot of work going on with even just a minimal staffing in March. If you move forward to the summer months and you look at kind of the May, June, Julys, and August, you see that call volume jumps up drastically. 67,000 calls for May and June. July, we're up to 72, then 71,000. That's a busy center. And just slightly behind Denver's numbers for Denver Police Department. This is a busy county. And then you see, coupled with that, the volume of outgoing calls. So these dispatchers aren't just taking the call, hanging up, and waiting for another call. There's a lot of work that goes with each one of these calls potentially. So they're having to do calls in, but also make calls out to follow through with standards that we have set for our organization. I hope that makes sense. So it's just an awful lot for these call takers. If you take that in a given month over a 24/7 operation, that's a large volume of calls. Over to the right, when you look at total calls dispatched for 2018, these are calls in which a call was forwarded to a dispatcher, whether it's police or fire, and they physically have to dispatch responding units. Meaning we took a call, the call created a dispatch service, and that call then has to be aired out for units to respond. This doesn't take into account the self-initiated activity that we know law enforcement does when they're out meeting with the citizen or making a citizen contact or a traffic stop or anything else of that manner. That number is not reflected in those call numbers, dispatch numbers in and of themselves. These are just actual calls that came in that required actual dispatch calls going out. Is that okay?
Actually, I have a question on that.
Yes, sir.
So you're saying that only 1/3 of the calls coming in were actually dispatched. So 2/3 of the calls coming in were somebody ordering pizza. I mean, what kind of calls were those that didn't create an action? on JeffCom?
We have a number of calls that come in where people are looking for information. Some are administrative calls that need to be transferred back into agencies to handle.
Okay, so you're taking in non-emergency calls as well that may go back to the agency?
Potentially, or people looking for information that we provide and move the call on. That doesn't require a uniform response or first responders response.
So is that typical of a 911 center to did? I mean, when you're associated to a police department, they call the front desk, or doesn't it start somewhere there first? They call into the 911 center first? Okay.
In my experience, it's common, but I've never dispatched, so.
Okay.
So you're also taking calls for Sheriff's Jail?
Yes.
Chief Greer, do you mind, would you come on up to the podium just so the folks who are watching at home can hear you?
Well, I was just reminding Jeff, it's easy when you're sitting there to remember stuff. But they also answer calls for Jefferson County Jail, do a lot of the admin calls for Jefferson County. In addition, if we have a house fire, there may be 20 calls come in for that house fire. If it's a good one that's, I shouldn't say a good one, a visible one, then we'll get 20 or 30 calls.
Okay, so you have correlation that
Right,
needs to
and so
happen.
it could be one fire generated 30 incoming calls. So, accidents generate multiple calls. That kind of stuff, that's why you're at about a third.
Well, I
is
want
all
to make
this
sure,
dispatch.
that our house is in order. We don't forward any of our non-emergency numbers to JeffCom only after hours. I'm looking for chiefs. Somebody, where's chief? Oh. I know there's a couple chiefs.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, the question is like after hours or these non, we'll just say, I don't even know which one to call them, but these type of calls that are coming in, we're not deferring any phone number of ours to their dispatch center to create more call volume. When we're open, we're taking those calls ourselves if they're just records calls or whatever calls. Some may slip through, right, to them, and then they have to transfer them back, but
That is correct. We handle most of our administrative calls. We have a phone tree set up in-house, but that's really not what, I don't think that's what Jeff's referring to.
no, I know he's not. I just want to clarifying, in our house, are we clear that we're not transferring? I know we were having some issues.
Now, some of our administrative phone calls may go to the comm center, but we're handling most of ours. So if somebody wants to get a hold of the Arvada Police Department administratively, they do not need to call JeffCom 911.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ford.
I just had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are animal calls sent to you as well, non-emergency, problems? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And those two, depending on agencies, now, I will tell you, not all agencies have set up a calling tree. Referring people to either us or investigations or whomever, records. So not all agencies have done that. The majority have. But yes, animal control calls will come in through our center. But you've got to know that folks that really want to talk to somebody, even after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they may get a calling tree, but one of the options is you can talk to dispatch. So we do get those calls. Mr. Fiver, you indicated they're going to come through. I can't tell you to what numbers without a bunch of research, but some of those calls definitely come through.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're making our best effort not to divert any calls into that call center. That's all.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Jones.
I may be going into the weeds here, so I apologize.
No, that's quite all right.
But it's interesting. So, the month of September, there was 21,000 calls dispatched. But the amount of, do you keep track of the amount of communication internally? So dispatchers to first responders? Because I know that that's going on constantly. And so, those dispatchers, they're not just pushing out a call and then they're done. They're active for, could be a long time on a particular call or several calls. So how many dispatches does one dispatcher handle in any given, 10-minute period? Do you know?
Well, I'm going to let Operations Manager Vicki Pickett do that. She's probably very familiar with that number.
Well, so it really depends on the event and what kind of information needs to be relayed. I can't give you the statistics off the top of my head.
No, that's fine.
But it is something actually that we do look at when we're looking at workload. We'll look at transmissions on a particular talk group that a dispatcher is responsible for to try to determine, if they, if we have too many transmissions for one person to handle that kind of thing. That is something that we're working on as well. That's our radio techs help pull us the statistics for us.
Yeah, no,
so I don't know
if
if that
just
answers your question, but
no, and I didn't expect that you were going to have that off the top of your head.
Yeah.
But it seems to me like, number one, your staffing is critical. throughout the day, and so I get, you know, the issues that you're having from that perspective.
It is. We can't foresee what type of call is going to come in. The training to the dispatcher is to gain as much information to move the call forward for dispatching purposes to get units en route, but they may stay on a call for an extended time until either units are on scene, and I'm referring more probably to the medical style calls or domestic violence calls, till a unit's on scene, then they'll disconnect. But what my takeaway and the hours I've spent on that floor is they no sooner disconnect, they have another call on top of them that fast. Now that call could be an admin call that they can handle very quickly. They could get into another protracted event right on top of it.
Right. No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I want to show you, we have standards that are set forth. The board has set forth standards that our goal is to meet. And these standards come to us from national organizations. And one of the standards is average of 90% of 911 calls answered within 15 seconds. What I've done here is I've taken the numbers from May and September stat reports that are forwarded out to the agencies and just did an average. Now, it's tough to do an average of that because summer times were busier, so I saw lower numbers, and we started out with a pretty good number in May, but then staffing drove some of those numbers down. So I just averaged the months across here, and in a minute I'm going to show you the slide that I did add that changes that 74%. And some of that's due to our hiring, our training, our cross-training, and certainly we're changing a culture. We've taken 8 cultures and tried to bring it into one and trying to change a floor culture, and I'll talk more about that. One of the other standards for us to meet is the average of 99% of 911 calls to be answered within 40 seconds. I did the very same thing here. Took May through September and just averaged them. We're at 96.3 when you just take it through September within that. So we're striking very close, but we haven't met the standard yet. And we share these numbers with the floor. Our folks know this. They know what our goal is within this and where we're to be targeting. Down here where it says calls to queue, and that's from the first keystroke to where it goes over where it's queued up for dispatch. The average of 90% of priority 1 and 2 calls are processed within 60 seconds. Did the same thing through May and September. Now, I've met with staff as recently as today because that's a concerning number because we're not meeting it. And I think what's happened to us is we've used the wrong metrics. And I'll let Kevin maybe speak a little bit more to that if you have questions around that. But it's when the call taker may open a screen, but the screen is standing idly by. There's not really a call there. They're not on a first keystroke of entering a call. We're seeing that it's capturing that time. So we need to work between our vendor, some understanding for us, building the proper reports, and I think we're going to see this number change. So I put an asterisk by that one for you because I think this is reflective of being a low number when we look at the raw data.
So you're saying that when you open the screen, it's counting that time? So that would make it an improved number.
The screen could be standing open for 15, 20 minutes before a call actually drops in where the call taker would have to then activate.
Oh, okay.
So it's clocking against our time and driving
while you're
this number
idling.
down.
While you're idling, your
Yeah.
dispatchers are idling.
And so we've trained them, we've talked about it, but we recognize we have to go back and potentially change that even further and emphasize it differently. We've seen that with some of the calls that have come up where they say, well, your delay was X. Well, no, it wasn't X because that screen's sitting idly by. We can listen and see based on our systems and technology exactly when that call dropped. So yeah, they may be open 5 minutes, but the call dropped, it was processed and moved to a queue and dispatched within 2 minutes. Well, you got to take that 5 minutes out of it. So I will just tell you the calls to queue comes with an asterisk for me. And we're going to work diligently now that we've recognized this to try to look at that number better. Because it certainly isn't meeting the standards. None of these numbers meet the standards as the board has set forth and as our agreements with the member agencies and our user agencies. They've given us a little bit of latitude. The board has given me latitude to stand this unit up, but they've asked for me within 6 months to meet these standards. We're not meeting them. And a lot of this is, and I'm not kicking the can, a lot of this has to do with our staffing numbers and where we're at with training people within the hiring process. So I'll talk a little bit more about this in the next slide. Whoops. Whoop, Kevin, you opened the wrong, oh no you didn't. This next slide that you don't have, and I'll draw your attention to it, it's what we did is in September here, we're not meeting the standards, and you see a number at 74% in September with 90% of the calls within 15 seconds. We looked at just October, and I wanted to know, based on some things that we've implemented on the floor, some encouragement and really working to change our culture. In 22 days, where are we at now? We're up to 83.2%. So we've made a 10% jump approximately in 22 days since the final number in September. So we're going to continue along that. We've challenged our staff that by the end of December, we need to be making this 90% mark. Again, we're changing a culture. We're re-emphasizing and continually emphasizing our training to change that number so people will pick up on it. We put some things in place, and we did it early on. And there was a news story that ran, oh goodness, a week or so ago on Fox 31, and they asked me, what have you done to try to correct 911 answering times? We have an alarm system in place, so they hear an audible. They have a visual on their screen, but they also have an audible alarm. I can hear it from my office. So when a call's sitting longer than 10 seconds, the alarm goes off. We just changed that timing on that alarm. We have it going off at 5 seconds now. So people have an audible that will kick in, and some of that is changing this number for us as well. We'll continue to work to make these standards. And then if you look over at the average of 99% of the 911 calls answered in 40 seconds, we're falling just short. Again, through the emphasis of jumping 10% in one, we knew that the other number would go up. And it will. And then I just put under the calls of queue, based on what I've explained, we've got to work on that, and I know that. So I want to look at kind of just some agency statistical numbers. And again, we're looking at numbers from April to September. So if you look at our Arvada Police Department alone, the total calls, and I'm just calls that were dispatched is what we've driven down to here, is that correct? Total dispatch calls, 25,739 calls. Golden, 6,000. These numbers are aligning to the percentages that were previously established even back in 16, 17 when the agency's first talking about this concept. So we're seeing that that's holding relatively true here. What I want to put over is issues get brought forth to us. Since the day cutover has happened, each agency has been encouraged, and it's not only just our member agencies, but it's also our user agencies. We provide dispatch services for 15 other agencies over and above the 8. We've let them know that if you have issues or concerns, please share them with us. What we have found is some of our issues and concerns are driven around training, certainly systems. We've had to grow and learn in systems, mapping, response plans. I'll give you a little bit more in a minute. For our Arvada Police Department, there's only been 11 documented concerns brought forth to us. Now, again, I'm going to put an asterisk next to this. That doesn't mean that's all the concerns. Because sometimes a supervisor may call in and question about something, or how did something happen this way, or please fill me in. I can't track those. Those are handled over the phone between either maybe a shift supervisor, sometimes even a line level person can look into those. The 11 reflected there for our Arvada Police Department are concerns that we have received an email, a phone call directly to operations management or ourselves, and we're tracking that. So if you look at that, I just figured out the percentage against how many calls are dispatched versus how many issues are brought forth, and that's the right column that you're viewing there. All I'm doing is a percentage against that. So what's been passed on to us is a very small number speaking. It's still too much. I get it. We're striving to get better. You'll look at some of the other agencies. Lakewood had 41 issues. But not all these were major issues. They're not issues because an address was wrong or the call taker did something wrong or the dispatcher did something wrong. What we found early on in transition is a lot of these issues had to deal with maps, MDTs, our mobile data computers in the cars, the CAD in and of itself, just trying to learn and grow within that. We're seeing these numbers go down exponentially each month. We're not seeing and having issues brought forth. I'm not saying they're not still coming forth, but they're going down. Fewer and further between because our center is learning from it, we're training from it, and we've corrected systems to try to overcome these issues individually. So when you look at the numbers to the right, these are the complaints we have documented. I can read them off one by one of each one of these agencies that are reflected up here. Some of the issues.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Jeff,
Sorry, Mr. Streeter.
No,
Mr. Pfeiffer has a question
yeah,
for
can you
you.
go back to that other? So one thing I didn't hear from you was why is fire so much higher than law enforcement?
Yeah, it's a great question. My background being in law, I'm learning. Fire is different, and Chief, please don't take that wrong. But
I heard earlier. But I heard earlier that the law enforcement are more difficult calls than the majority of the calls, and so you had less error rates with more volume, but yet easier call. Trying to follow that.
What we found, and this is me learning in this system, fire relies heavily on their maps to work. Listen, police officers that know their area, and this is 32 years of me being a cop, I didn't rely on a map, and if I did, it was a map book. That's how old I am. So I didn't rely on a map. Fire does. That's how they figure their quickest, most efficient route into it, where to park apparatus, how to properly locate hydrants, etc. So they become very dependent on mapping. We found that because of CAD and the way they had their mapping, and we've done multiple upgrades since, the maps have gotten better. Now, they had good maps when they were receiving their map services from their previous agency. We just had to grow into it. A lot of it had to do with mapping. A lot of it had to do with response plans, and I touched on that briefly earlier because Arvada may send certain apparatus to a certain type of call that West Metro does totally different. So we had to try to work through standard operating procedures, SOPs, to create those response plans. And it just took time to grow. You know, what's different in evergreen fire versus urban setting, night and day, in many of their response plans. So some of this is us growing through that. Some of it is their issues were absolutely spot on, but a lot of them were system issues. Some were address issues for us. We did make errors. Call takers made errors in entering an address. So we've trained through those, but some of these are more response plan, CAD issues, MDT, and mapping issues.
Okay, thank you.
Some of the themes, as I said, if you look at law, not familiar with new and different procedures of CAD. That was the complaint. It was yeah, the officers are dealing with something new, but more so, the dispatchers were dealing with a brand new CAD. What I'll remind you is we did something that when I talked to some of these other executive directors, they said, you did what? You started a new CAD at the same time you transitioned? Yes, we did. For 6 of the 8 agencies, they were moving on to a brand new computer-aided dispatch system. They'd never seen it before, short of the training that was provided to them. It was brand new. Many of the other executive directors think that's absurd that I've spoken to. I can't believe you tried that. We had growing pains through it, as you can see. Incorrect, updated, or outdated and missing info. Yes. We had, again, I'm going to go back to some mapping issues, but we just had some incorrect info that was put in the system because you're trying to learn where to put it, how to mark it, how to classify certain information. We had errors. I'm just picking off the common themes again. Not dispatching or airing or updating calls in a timely manner. We saw that because, again, as much as the call takers, it was new to them to enter the call, it was new for the dispatcher sitting there to figure out where's the information on the CAD screen because I knew where it was before. And how do I update that information? So they had to learn as much as the call takers did. The themes for the fire, response plan issues as I spoke of, incorrect addresses entered in calls, we had errors. And again, some of that goes back, Mr. Jones, to some of your questions about geography, not knowing Arvada or not knowing Golden, potentially. Not 100%, but yes, potentially. And we've worked through better mapping and some training to overcome that. Station alerting issues, goodness gracious, we had a lot of that. Arvada Fire had a system in place, but we had Golden and many other entities that were taking on a new station alerting. It wasn't a JeffCom issue, it was a station alerting issue with the company in which they contracted with. And then certainly I mentioned MDC and mapping issues.
So we have a question from Councilmember Ford.
Mr. Streeter, do we do any education for residents on how to call? Given the fact that usually in an emergency situation anyway, people are not necessarily thinking. I think about the issue that event that recently occurred in Aurora where the gentleman was shot by police. Unfortunately, and part of that was due to the fact that the person calling in, the wife, I believe it was the wife, really wasn't giving all the facts correctly, and so there weren't a lot of good there wasn't a lot of good information. But, you know, have the organizations thought about educating people so that when they do call in, they know exactly what to tell, you know, what to say? Try to really train people to think about what information needs to be communicated.
You know, that's a great question. And to some extent, yes. But knowing during trying times, traumatic times, it's just difficult to get certain information out of certain individuals. What they're dealing with at the point in time that they're seeing it or engaged in it, they're not supposed to be going through those things in their life. So as much education as we can put out of information, even as much as a smart 911, that we know where they're at and we have access to them, we can locate them, find them, and have information maybe pertinent about them individually, that's a big educational push. Vicki, help me out. I mean, are we doing other forms of education, telling people what type of information we need specifically? I
think typically, as the centers did a lot of public education effort, I will tell you that with the chaos of this transition, you know, that is certainly on our list and our radar to do this in the future, to get more public education out there. But to be perfectly blunt, we haven't had the time to do that with all of this transition. That is going to be something down the road, though.
Well, and I'm going to share with you here, just to kind of wrap up, goals that we've set for ourselves organizationally. And within that, there's a big community outreach and engagement with the community as a goal. So I'll kind of go through those. But did that kind of answer your question a little bit? And there's not one definitive that I can tell you, everybody, you know, refer to this guide. We don't have that, so specifically. So I want to kind of close up with goals. And I want you to know that we as an organization, much as cities, counties, and authorities, they create goals for themselves. So meeting with staff and meeting with line level people throughout the organization, we've created a series of goals. And I just want to kind of skim over them. You know, the ideal when this was set forth is even as early as a proof of concept in the early discussions, lends itself to efficiencies and effectiveness. And we could spend probably a considerable amount of time what that may potentially look like. But we now have dispatch services under one roof. And we're able to communicate across this floor. And that's what I'm seeing taking place on this floor. Before we worked in 8 silos. Now we're starting to see the teamwork and the exchange of information and helping each other out. And the cross-training is really brought a lot of that about. And we're going to continue to push for that. That lends itself to the efficiencies and the effectiveness of everybody in one center, a consolidation such as this. But goals that we've established for ourselves is first and foremost, we're going to be a well-equipped, responsive, educated, trained, and respected staff. If we're going to be the Tier 1 organization that we've established ourselves to be, we've got to continue to strive to be educated and trained. We've got to have the best equipment, which we do. We're state-of-the-art right now. Now, we know technology changes at a pretty rapid clip, but we're committed to this as our goals to strive to move forward in that regard. We'll be a top-tier PSAP. We're going to develop robust recruiting. When you see the hiring numbers that we're able to do month after month with some levels of consistency, that's robust recruiting. That's us being out there and attending job fairs and certainly getting our name out there, but really striving to get the right applicants and advertising in the right places at the right time. We want to find ways to streamline it. I can tell you, our hiring process, talking to other organizations, we are streamlining it. We're doing things that the Denvers and Auroras and Fort Collins and et cetera can't and are not, or electing not to do in their hiring process. But we're doing it in such a fashion, and I presented this to our board, not to minimize our standards of hiring. So it's aggressive. We've got a great HR staff, and they've worked diligently to build that process. We're expanding technology as one of our goals. We're developing personnel evaluation systems. We needed to do that as a first-year organization. We're creating a comprehensive workforce. We have certified trainers. We've classified people as, we have an ECS 1, that's really a call taker, but we've classified other positions. If you can take call taking and dispatch, and you have a certain amount of skill sets and certifications, you may be a 2. If you have more, you may be a 3. So it's a hierarchy of opportunity and growth and development for our staff within this. Yeah, cut off on me, Kevin. So our second goal is an attitude. It's an attitude of us providing customer service. It's an attitude of us bringing 8 agencies together and getting them to understand the level of customer service that we have to be at. We've made that a goal. Our goal is to meet these standards that I presented before you today and make sure we're doing that to meet national standards, but more importantly, to provide service to our community. Our third goal is really create a strategic plan. We have an opportunity, after only being live on this floor for 7 months, to, as an organization, working with the board, creating a strategic plan, but we've created teams within the organization to help us create a strategic plan for next year and moving forward. We've completed analysis. We'll continue to complete SWOT analysis and assessments on our organization. I find that's a good learning tool for us. What's working, what isn't working, where's our opportunities, and where do our threats lie moving forward. We will continue to develop goals. We'll continue to build upon our operations, our functions to get better and stronger. We're going to evaluate our process every year, and more so, even sooner than every year. We're looking in the future to become CLIA certified, much like our Arvada Police Department. That is certainly a goal and a vision for us, and we'll continue in that growth. And then lastly, just what are our objectives? We want to ensure interoperability with organizations, okay, external and internal. We want to create a better system to exchange information with our partners, information with the community as far as what to do, how to do that effectively. We create other partnerships throughout that exchange of information, everything through the DA's office. And one of the things I want to highlight here is we have created a partnership with Warren Tech right here in Arvada. Warren Tech has stood up this year in September an emergency communication modular program. Through the cooperation of agencies that have transitioned into this, they have provided equipment, and we will provide resources. They have hired a full-time instructor to teach kids how to become emergency communication dispatchers. We will continue to build those partnerships external as well. We're going to evaluate our processes. We have to plan for future growth. Technology changes. We have Next Gen 911 coming on board. We have to start anticipating what that growth looks like. And we're committed to doing that. With these goals, they give us guidance. We're meeting in 2 weeks with the board. I'm meeting with the board for the board to weigh in on a strategic plan. How do we move forward from here? This is 7 months of operation, but it's time for us to start thinking strategically, what next? Hiring is still going to be up there. Training is still going to be up there, but where do we take it from there? So I'm happy to answer any other questions specific to whatever you'd like.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Councilmember Miller.
Thank you so much, Mr. Streeter. You did not have an easy task, and I commend you for the work that you have done. Short staff, new technology, addresses all over the place. Whew. Oh my goodness, gives me heartburn just thinking about it. So I just had a couple of thoughts. You had mentioned that getting to the marketing and the YouTube videos might be difficult because you have more important things to do, but maybe our cities could help with that. Maybe our city's KATV could help make some videos on how to appropriately call 911 and what information when you're under duress, what should you be saying. And I'm sure Lakewood, Golden, Evergreen, Conifer would all be willing to chip in whatever resources you need from us.
Thank you.
Ask.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Similar to Warren Tech, Red Rocks Community College might be an interesting opportunity in partnership with how you've got a smirk on your face like you've been there, but that might be a great opportunity to help pull people in as well.
Yeah, we've built a great partnership specifically with Warren Tech. My goodness, what they're doing and providing to these kids and creating that community environment, but also these kids being on the floor with us and learning this as a profession. Gives us opportunity for the future. These kids become available and graduate a year from now. We've got a hiring pool of, what do they have in the program, 13, 14 kids. This was a great opportunity for all of the organizations involved, but more importantly for all of Metro Denver, quite frankly.
Sure. Well, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
All right, Mr. Streeter, so a couple of questions for you. Well, I'm trying to put them in the order I wanted to ask you. So, first off, what best practices have you looked at? Because I didn't hear anything about talking with other organizations like AdCom or some of the Maryland PSAPs. There's some really good ones out east that have done this for decades. But I didn't hear you ever say anything about, we went and researched this with peer groups to take the best practices and lessons learned so we can avoid a lot of these struggles. What are you doing with that? Are you doing anything with that?
Really, the only person that was brought in from the outside, to my knowledge, to give us some insights, working through a consultant that JeffCom had hired early on in this process, Revolution Advisors, a gentleman by the name of Brian Wilkerson, was the gentleman from Charlotte, North Carolina. He had gone through something. They were a comparable size organization. He came here and presented to the board before I was hired here, and really gave some insights of some do's and some don'ts, what to anticipate. His name's Jim Lake. I've had a few conversations with him since. I've spoken to a few other executive directors. It's really not, we're not having the conversation on benchmark, because the takeaway for me has been really evolved around hiring and staffing has been the biggest hit. That's been the common theme regardless of which executive director from other centers I've spoken to, because that's kind of the pot we're in right now. Best practices are set forth to us by the NINAs and the APCOs. So we abide by those best practices and service sides of it. But in anticipating the landmines, quite frankly, Mr. Pfeiffer, I haven't had time, to take a road trip and go spend a few days with the center. So it's usually a quick phone call and say, what do you anticipate about this?
But could you have looked at, like, knowing that 70% of the agencies moving over didn't use that form of CAD? I mean, couldn't that have been looked at a little bit differently and thought, well, shoot, since 70% of our user base is using a certain software, should we start there and then migrate versus going to something that's very unfamiliar and only 2 agencies we're familiar with? Was that a best practice? I mean, you were warned.
Sure, and it's a great question. I'll try to answer it my way, but it's probably a question better served from my board and previous discussions during the whole creation agreement and thought process behind that. Trying to run what would be the equivalent of 7 CADs on a floor was impossible. We couldn't do it.
Were they all 7 unique CADs?
They were all unique CADs.
They were all unique.
Kevin, help me out. Come on up here.
Yes, sir. So we had 3 agencies that were on the same CAD. That would have been all the fire agencies, Evergreen, Arvada, and West Metro Fire. We had 2 agencies that were on the same CAD, and that was Arvada PD and Lakewood PD. After that, they were all separate. Okay. So at best, we would have had 3 agencies that were familiar with a CAD, but they would have been familiar with a fire-geared CAD, not a consolidated CAD like what we're running.
Okay. And my point is more of just an example of thinking something through. I just want to make sure best practices were being applied. Irregardless if it happened 15 or 18 months ago, you're here today and it's you're the executive director and represent the organization. I have a chief and I have a chief that sit on your board. He doesn't work for us, but we kind of adopt him as part of our group. But we do expect that, we minimize the impacts that you were highlighting throughout the night.
Sure,
So,
and it's a great question and a great concern. It's a concern to us as well. Organizationally, we knew it was going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Prior to even transitioning over, I don't want you to think we just welcomed him into the building that day, pat him on the back, have a seat, and answer a call, because that did not happen. Every one of these individuals received a minimum of 40 hours of training prior to even stepping foot into our center, as it relates to CAD and that system. Keep in mind, these were all experienced dispatchers. They weren't brand new kids off the street. So they understood the process of taking a call. What we were teaching them is how to implement it or enter it into a system. And certain screens look different to them and process look different. Even to those agencies that were on TriTech, this was a different system. It was a different version of a TriTech CAD. So I don't want you to think we didn't train them or anticipate that there were going to be issues and hiccups around that. I'm going to refer you back to the timeline of the cutover as well. We had a process. We had thought through this quite well, I felt, as an executive director taking this position, that we anticipated coming in, if our timeline would have held and we were able to transition those agencies in February and March and April and not try to do it over 3 weeks, it was going to give us the opportunity to stabilize a floor. It was going to give people in smaller increments, knowing what their skill sets were, the opportunity to come in, train, learn, help each other before the next organization came through the door.
Well, it's pretty aggressive. Daily for a few weeks is pretty aggressive.
It was the definition of insanity, quite frankly.
No, I think that was a huge challenge. I have a few more questions. So, quality of service. I didn't see in your statistics anything addressing a performance measure around quality of service, because I think that there is, being a recipient of lack of quality from calling JeffCom, I think that there is some areas of opportunities where you're looking for quality or accuracy, and I didn't see that in any of your performance measures. Were you looking at good examples, like when I called, the one time I called, I'm sure I'm one of the 11, your dispatcher was trying to dispatch Lakewood here into Arvada. So, what do you do to fix those kind of accuracy issues?
So we actually have a quality assurance specialist, and she does random pulls of all calls, a percentage of all calls, especially the high acuity calls she also pulls. So we do have a practice in there. I mean, honestly, we're still tweaking the process, but yes, she does quite a bit.
So they're random, they pull it, and they also look at the
Exactly.
screen and what they typed in, and
Exactly.
you can see all that recorded.
They listen to the phone call, they look at the CAD sequence, and if necessary, they interview the dispatcher as well. So
and is there a performance measure placed on the employees on
Yes.
this? Okay.
Yes.
I think that answers that question. So the goals. One of the things that I noticed here, when were they established? Were they before you or during you or recently? And then how were they communicated to the organization as a whole?
Sure. Gosh, I'd have to go back and look. I think we established those August, July.
Of this year?
They were this year, after we got everybody in and started building our concentration of goals. I wanted everybody to be part of some input relative to those goals, how they were communicated. We have shared drives. We've given them to the supervisor. If you've been in our center, or if you haven't been, we've got a large TV monitor. These goals are constantly running on that TV to this day, keeping those goals in front of them. I have an expectation that my operations managers work towards those goals through the supervisors, through the line level folks.
So there's a golden thread. Mark Devon's not here, but there's a golden thread down from your goals all the way to the call taker that says we want to make sure these goals are achieved in your annual review or your performance, and we need everyone to be rowing the same direction to be successful.
That's certainly the ideal behind our goals, so people can take part in them and feel valued as moving this organization forward, certainly.
Yeah.
We have created recently what we call advisory planning teams. And with those teams, when I went in and met with them, I've reviewed the goals again with them and made this kind of the base work for things that we need to do as these teams develop and address organizational direction.
Okay. And then one thing I would notate in your goals is I think everyone should have a responsibility to try to save lives. And I think that should be number one. And maybe it's the no dust statement, but it's important when you write it down and it's scrolling on your screens.
Sure.
That everyone should be reminded why they're there. I mean, and it's a tough job. Every call taker, it's a tough job. But we also need to be reminded every day that we're also there to, just because you're not on the beat or in the street or in a firehouse, you're equally important in saving lives. So I would encourage that to be a goal in your list.
Thank you.
What about, as you know, social media has been a little active with your organization. And one concern I have is the health of the organization in a working environment. Retention is tough. We get that. We went through that. But why don't you kind of explain to me how the organization, how you're trying to foster a healthy environment for the employees there and really retain the employees and kind of address some of the concerns in that stressful environment I just mentioned. It's tough.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, it's through communication, okay? Social media is going to be social media. You face it, I faced it, I've faced it for years.
Right.
People are going to put things up there, and all I would tell you is anything that's printed about JeffCom up to date that I've had the opportunity to read, take it with a grain of salt. There's two sides to every story.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's leveled with a lot of inaccuracies, at least the things that I've read. Some of the things more recently are trying to add conjecture to personnel matters. I'm not at liberty to discuss personnel matters, so that information is inaccurate by nature. How we choose and how we've elected to bring the information in and make for a healthy environment is through these advisory planning teams as one mission and goal. Certainly, I came in with my own goals of building an organization that's built on fairness and impartiality. Transparency, absolutely, but providing voice. And I've shared that repeatedly with my staff, with line level staffs. That's certainly the mission that I have for myself because I hold myself to those standards. And I want people's input, and we've encouraged their input. Does it come in different ways, shapes, and forms? Absolutely it does. Some people want something as simple as we want to wear jeans every day. That wasn't one of our policies. But you have other people that really want to tackle the higher level things of a system issue, a mapping issue, a CAD issue. And those things we take to heart to make us more efficient and effective as an organization. So there are avenues put in place. We don't stifle communication. We encourage communication from our folks at all levels and all ranks. We'll continue to do that and build upon it. I do think that these advisory planning teams, they pick the people who want to be on it, they pick the topics in which they want to address, and we're letting them do that. Now, I'll tell you, for me, I'm inclined to go with most recommendations, but I've asked them to support them. Much like you as a council ask people when they bring a council action to you to support those council actions. I want them to bring recommendations for them, but I want them to do it with a very clear mind and a plan to make a clear recommendation to us as a staff.
That sounds good. I'd just encourage to keep working on that and keep fostering a good environment.
Absolutely.
I think it's important because they are a backbone to our communities, and if your organization's not successful, then our community experiences those issues, right?
Absolutely.
Indirectly or directly. So I think we're as good as sometimes the weakest link, right? And so if we can keep everyone together, that would be great.
That is certainly our goal.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. McGough.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Streeter, for a very thorough and informative presentation. I took note, you presented information about the goals, you also talked about national standards, you talked about the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. Are you, I'm wondering about the accreditation process. Is there a separate accreditation for a call center such as yours? What about standards and accreditation? Can you tell us what that is and whether you're in pursuit yet of accreditation?
I'm going to answer that a few different ways. Yes, there are specific standards to call centers. Now, of the 8 agencies, only one of them had a call center that was accredited by CALEA standards, and that was Jefferson County Sheriff's Department.
Within CALEA, are there a subset of standards for call centers?
Yeah, that's where I'm going next. There's a series of standards.
Okay.
In Arvada's standards right now, and I believe it's Chapter 82, there are a series of standards that they'll rely on us to provide them information to remain accredited. If I become accredited as a standalone dispatch consolidated center, there's a whole litany of other standards that we must adhere to. Where we're at in the process, we've created our folders, we've created our partnerships with our accredited agencies, we're sharing information with them. Most recently, about 2 weeks ago, I was at a conference and sat down and spoke to CALEA about how to best do this for a call center and where we go next. Now that will become a board decision because it carries a fiscal impact. Certainly it will take an FTE and a considerable thought process around that. I do believe it's the goal of this board, and I don't want to speak directly for them because it was certainly an early goal that was kind of pointed out to me. We'd like to move in that vein, but it'll be a board decision what the next steps will be. But I can tell you behind the scenes, already building the folders, already putting information in those folders so we can share that and make their accreditation process that much more efficient, if you will.
Okay. That's great because, at least for me, I'm a great believer in the accreditation process. And of course, with our fire department and our police department both being accredited, and you're feeding into that because they wouldn't achieve their accreditation without the meeting of standards through the call center. I hope that you'll get the independent accreditation. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you very much for your presentation tonight. So in my other job, we operate a call center, and our busiest month was we take about 26,000 calls a month. And so I understand staffing, and I understand all of those things that come into play. We're not in the middle of saving lives. We're in the middle of saving tires one at a time. So it's totally different. So there are emergencies, but they're different emergencies. So I totally get and respect the challenges that you're having. And this might be a little bit of a follow-up to Mr. McGough's question, but and you had referenced kind of this level 1 and maybe that's that accreditation that you're speaking to, but what's the biggest challenge or hurdle today? And there may be a bunch, but in your mind, what's the number one thing that if we could clear this hurdle, we're that much closer to getting that accreditation or that level 1 status?
Please don't take this wrong, but it's an easy answer. It's staffing.
Okay.
In the
So maybe
simplest
I'm
terms.
leading the witness. No, I don't.
No. It is truly staffing.
Yeah.
And I want to clarify tier 1. What we mean by a tier 1 and what my board is referencing as a tier 1. We want the Denvers, Auroras, and anybody else in the Colorado state to look up to us.
Yeah.
We're not second to anybody. We'll have the best pay. We're going to have the best benefits package available to our employees and the best working environment. Yeah. So I don't want to speak out of turn for Chief Greer, but I feel, or even Chief Straight. But I believe my takeaway from this reference of a tier 1 is we're second to nobody.
Yeah.
We hold our own. We meet the standards. We continue to grow and develop, and we anticipate for new technology, new growth in the center.
And I appreciate that because I think, as policymakers and as, city council, and I'm not going to speak for everybody, but my sense is that, when we decided to kind of go down this path, we agreed that it was the right thing to do. Sure. But I think we also, in our heart of hearts, also agreed that we wanted to be number 1 with you. Yes. And so if there are things that we can do better as a city council, to help support your efforts to become the best, we want as much feedback as we can get also, because that allows us to make better decisions on behalf of our citizenry here that you're serving. So again, I appreciate the job that you have. I don't envy the work that you do. I know that it's critically important, and public safety is key, I know, for all of us. And so thank you for what you do at JeffCom.
And thank you for your support. Appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions from council? So, Mr. Streeter, I just want to make a quick comment. Thank you for the job you're doing. Thank you for the high goals and standards you've set for your organization. And while I know that this is a giant challenge to take on all at once, and bound to be some bumps along the way, I commend you guys for taking on the challenge, taking on the bumps head on, and striving forward to a better dispatch solution for all of us here in Jefferson County. At the time when I considered us entering into JeffCom or not, there's always the enticement to, well, this is going to save us money. But the reality was, this to me was more about, let's have better service. Let's make sure that for those of us who own businesses or housing that's on the border of one jurisdiction to another, that we get enhanced service over those 8 individual silos. And so sounds to me like you guys are well on your way and taking appropriate steps to get there. And I just want to thank you for that and encourage you to continue on. Don't lose sight of the goal to be the best. And we'd love to see you back here, in the future, and then probably not very far future, to get another update. I think these are real important for both us and our community out there to hear from you and let us know how it's going. So
thank you, and I appreciate that, and happy to come back anytime.
Yeah.
What I'll offer, and I've done this with other councils and authorities, we're an open door. We're a 24/7, 365 operation. If you're in the area and would like to stop in, we'd be honored to walk you around, explain process, and just show you our center. It's the opportunity for us to show off to you what you've had the vision to put together and support throughout. So we want to take that and offer that.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Appreciate your time.
Is it all right if I just ask?
Yeah, Chief, come on up. And
Just to let you know, on behalf of Arvada Fire, I can tell you that, and Jeff will vouch for this, I was pretty upset with the level of service we were getting through pretty much July into August, and he knows I was mad. But we had the 59, it seemed like more than that, issues. But I will tell you that the last month and a half, we've got 2. And our center, when we had it, made more than 2 mistakes that were brought to our attention by our officers. And firefighters complain about everything, and so they would let us know. And I will tell you that the improvement we've seen, the staff there has just done an incredible job of fixing all of the issues we have. And today, I'm pretty happy with the level of service. Now, they have to get their staffing up, but in defense of the current staffing level, the day that they opened, Arvada Police, for instance, had 10 people coming over in a center that should have had 19 people. So they came over 9 short, and then they're down from that. And so they were fighting an uphill battle before they opened the doors. And it wasn't just Arvada, it was Lakewood, it was Golden and Wheat Ridge were never fully staffed. And Jeffco Sheriff was short-staffed. Fire agencies, for some reason, we were able to keep ours. But so the day they opened, they were short-staffed, and a lot of that came to them that way. And so they've done a great job of taking minimum staffing and accomplishing what we need from Arvada Fire, which is citizen and firefighter safety is number one. They're taking great care of us today, and I've really appreciated the difference that I've seen there. The fire that was on TV, I met with that guy. That was right after JeffCom opened, and there were some issues back then. I mean, it was a new center, and I met with them, and he came forth with some issues that he said we had, that we got lost. Believe it or not, we don't need maps to get around the city, but we sure like them, but we don't need them. But our guys drove straight there. And so people get different ideas about what really happened on scenes then we can it's like you said, social media takes over. And this guy was typical, and I'm not saying anything against Mr. Haber. He has his feelings, and he lost a dog in a house. But the other side is, there was some inaccuracies in what was reported, even when he came to see me. So they're doing a great job, and I just want you to know that you can be assured that I think the center will be what we call a Tier 1 center in the not too distant future. And I'm pleased with where they are today. So thanks for all the work they've done.
Thank you.
And thanks to the dispatchers for hanging in there.
Thanks. And Chief, thanks for the comments. It's good to hear those from a board member as well as a operating agency. So thank you. And thank you for coming down tonight with us.
Well, thank you. If I could just ask for just one thing. I mean, we talk about social media, but with your permission, can I share something with you?
Sure, absolutely.
Would that be okay? It was on the desktop. It just says Facebook. As much as social media tends to drive a lot of things for all of us, as I said, and I'm not going to go on some pedestal about social media, I want to share a couple things that came out of Arvada this week. And this is from an Arvada neighborhood. Will that open up?
We've got it on our screen.
You have it on your
We can
screens?
see it on our
This
screen.
is from an Arvada neighborhood this week, thanking the call takers, thanking the professionalism and the service that was awarded and provided to them by JeffCom. Those are the ones that do all of our hearts well. You would agree with that, I'm sure. So I take those as big wins. Arvada Police Department tragically was involved in an officer-involved shooting last week. Wheat Ridge Police Department responded in. Chief Brennan, one of the comments from Chief Brennan on this was addressing professionalism, the accountability of officers involved in critical incidents such as this, but just really overall thanking the staff of JeffCom. Those are and his wasn't social media, his was just an email directly to us. But these are the social media sites that, quite frankly, I want to share. This isn't from an ex-employee, this isn't from anybody else, this is from our public that we serve, thanking us as an entity, as authorities, as first responders for the work. So I just wanted to share that with you, and I don't know if you'd seen this before, but we tend to wag one way with social media and we forget these. And I feel these are critical to our success.
Mr. Pfeiffer has one more question
Yeah,
for
Mr.
you.
Chair, I appreciate seeing the positive too. And just to point out, Mike, because I think we're hooked on social media making that comment, being on the First Net Governance Board for the state, I hear a lot within those circles.
Sure.
And that's where some of my concerns come from, are actually from that organization, right? Which is a representation of all facets of first responder, public health, dispatchers, everything.
Absolutely.
So, I appreciate Out of the 3 times I've called JeffCom, only 1 was successful, and luckily it was the last one that I had, which was recently. And they're not 911, I went through non-emergency, but the first 2 were far from stellar, if not completely wrong. So I appreciate the progress, but there's still a lot of work to do. And we need to keep going that way.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
Absolutely.
and I've been a big supporter of going into these type of 911, being around AdCom and another organization, so I get the synergies, but we should always look to our peer groups to try to improve, to see where they can help us, or what have they've learned in situations, and not sit in a silo and try to do the best job we can all around, not just with the employees' environment, but what we do and how we answer the calls, you know, all those other things. You know, when I call in, they have to say JeffCom, fire, and dispatch something. It's long words. It's a lot of words. You know, is that a best practice? You know, that's a question I've always asked our chief. Are those the things that would be good? You know, I don't think people know what JeffCom is. When you talk about social or video, no one in our county really knows what JeffCom is. JeffCom, police, fire, they have no idea. They never heard of the city. They never heard of that statement.
Sure.
Those are the things that we need to keep working on, and
Yes,
not
sir.
just solely focus on one little thing. We've got to look at, unfortunately, in your world, there's a lot more than just staffing, right? You've got relationships to work with. You've got councils to deal with. You have IGAs that you have to be holding to. You've got to hold accreditation. You've got to do PSAs, you know, public service announcements. I mean, you have so much more things to do. So keep striving, keep doing it. I have seen an improvement, at least at the last call I had. So I don't have to rely on social media to know if it's good or bad because I had the experience. So keep doing it, keep going in the same direction, and I hope you get there. We want you to be there because we believe this is the right answer. We just got to get over the hump of the quality, and I think we're getting there. Maybe we're on the downside of that hill. So,
I believe we're rounding the corner.
yeah, I'd
Very
agree.
much so.
I'd agree.
Okay, great.
So I'd like to see more reports around that if we can too. I'd like these reports. I've never seen any of these before till tonight. So, you know, just to see how well we're doing. We used to get them from our dispatch all the time. So anything you can share over
I will work-
once a year or whatever would be great.
Sure, and I'm happy to come back and I'll work with Chief Straight and see that you have
Yeah,
information.
why don't I make a suggestion? You can work with our chief, who's obviously, I believe, a member of your board, so provide the information we're looking for. So thanks again for coming out. We really appreciate it.
Thanks
This is
for having us.
important stuff. It's great for you to come and see us, so thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Okay, Ms. Gillis, do we have anything else for tonight, or any updates from the staff?
No, sir.
Okay, with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.